a lot of the times when we reach burnout, we kind of feel that it's our fault. Like in the beginning, I said, it's self-inflicted, right?
Yes.
But is it really? Welcome everyone to today's episode of the Out of Office podcast. My name is Jacques, and today we're diving into a topic that's on so many minds these days. It's something that really can sneak up on you and it leaves you drained and demotivated and really questioning what you're working for. It's called burnout, and we're going to talk about what it looks like, how it affects us, and how can we reignite that spark when it seems to have gone out. But before we dive in, I want to take a moment to introduce someone truly special. Terry, who's not just our head of talent acquisition, but also the heart of our HR team. And she plays such an essential role in the well-being of everyone here. Um, she she looks after over 100 people. And when I asked some of them to describe her, it's clear just how much she means to everyone. Some of the words that were used was nurturing, empathetic, compassionate, maternal, reassuring, and really just comes down to selflessly being concerned with the well-being of those in her charge. So welcome, Terry. It's nice to have you here.
Thanks, Doc. Such a nice, warm welcome. And yeah, so I am Terry. I am head of talent at VA Central. And it's so nice to actually hear some of that positive feedback because that's exactly, how I feel and how I am. I think it's really, really important to look after, your team as well as, our virtual assistants because mental health is real and it's something that you really need to address. At the end of the day, we're all human and we've all got a well-being to look after. So yes, that is of utmost importance to me.
Yeah, absolutely, especially in a remote setting like we are.
Definitely, definitely.
So Terry, I know, you've got your own journey with burnout and, we'll be sharing a little bit about that, some of our personal experiences, our strategies, of dealing with burnout, recognizing, how to notice burnout, beforehand, and just hopefully a little bit of inspiration and, self-reflection for anyone going through this right now. And,
Yeah,
yeah, I think if we go down to the crux of it, burnout isn't just a feeling of um it's not just about feeling a bit worn out. It's like you're running on fumes, you're going through the motions, but you're lacking any real drive or satisfaction in your work. And I remember hitting that wall myself thinking, why am I still doing this? You can't pour from an empty cup, right? And
definitely.
sometimes it takes a real wake-up call to realize just how much you've been ignoring your own needs, if that's the right phrase. And to me, that signifies that burnout is almost exclusively self-inflicted, regardless of whether, you have external factors involved, like a poor management or something like that. What is your take on that? Do you think that's true?
Look, I think it's a big pill to swallow for a lot of people. When you hear that it's self-inflicted, a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, that's just another thing that's added on to me. And, there's something that I could have done. And, I think it's really important to dive into that because yes, I do agree that it is self-inflicted, but there's not enough information around burnout in the work environment these days. We've gone from a very fast-paced working environment, and especially after COVID, and as we progress and as technology comes in, everything's fast-paced. So if you're not aware of what burnout is and how to prevent it or how to recognize the early signs of it, it is quite hard to say that it's self-inflicted. So, I mean, that's hence why we're doing this webinar, is to bring awareness to that. And I think once you know how to identify what burnout is, then yes, I do agree that it is very self-inflicted.
I'm just touching on something you said there, about the fast-paced environment that we're in. That's actually so true because I'm just taking my job as an example. And, one thing that I typically have to do is, for example, write a blog post, or I have to do maybe the SEO of something, or, I have to do some technical tasks. And back in the day, not even long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, it was expected for me to do this amount of work and I had to do it well. And now all of a sudden, because of all the technological advances that we've had, all of a sudden I have to do this much and I have to do it at the same quality. And that's what is expected of me. So all of a sudden I have to do so much more with the same amount of time. And that in itself, I guess, also can cause a little bit of a burnout because your mind just splits over so many different things. What do you think?
Definitely, no, definitely. And I think that's exactly why it's so important to structure yourself and to structure your work life and adapt, because that's what's happening over the years. I mean, we've got to become quicker, and the more quicker we become, you can't lose the quality of it either. I agree. It's tough, but you've got to have a system in place. So, like anything that works needs to have a system in place, and you are no different to that. So yeah,
Mm.
that's why I specifically want to dive into what burnout is, because I think a lot of people don't actually know what burnout is.
I've heard a quote recently that said something along the lines of every man knows reflection and introspection when he's at his lowest bad time. And you can't do anything other than wallow in retrospective assessments. But one
Mm,
of my favorite things that I've learned from Matthew McConaughey is when things are going really well, given that's, presumably what you want more of, it might be worth deconstructing those times when things are going well. Because, we sure as hell deconstruct the reasons why we're in a funk and we
mm,
don't believe that we're there by accident. I mean, we really take ourselves to the woodshed and show ourselves, exactly why we're guilty for every reason, and we condemn ourselves for every reason that we got to that spot, right? And if we're going to do that, I say let's cheers. Let's deconstruct the reasons why we're happy. Let's inspect everything we did to achieve this euphoria, and let's praise ourselves for everything that we did right. Knowing that this feeling might not last forever and that we will have a mountain to climb shortly. So take stock of what you're doing wrong, but also take stock of what you're doing right. What do you think of this concept or this quote in general?
no, definitely. I think it's reversing the narrative. I think it's so easy, and it's quite interesting how natural it is to everybody to deconstruct themselves when they are in the wrong or things have gone bad. But if you could reverse the narrative and you could do that in a positive way, and I mean that's one of the things that I've actually, put down to discuss in more detail on how to avoid burnout. And it's about being grateful, but recognizing what you are doing right and concentrating on what you're doing right, because the power of your mind is really powerful, and I don't think we quite realize that. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how so much of content that people like and consume, like books and podcasts and autobiographies and memoirs, um, is deconstructing the success of others, where, so we'll happily dissect success in other people, but we tend to only dissect failure in ourselves. And there's this odd asymmetry where we bestow all the glory on those people. Well done. I must find out how to do that more. Even if it doesn't fit me, even if they're, in a different constitution, a different background, from a different time, for me, I'm going to focus on the negative.
Exactly. I think it's such a natural thing to do. And I think if you're not conscious of, putting that act in place and putting that as one of your systems, if I can put it that way, then you do tend to go to the negative. So being mindful is so, so important.
Terry, when you hit that point yourself, when I mean, I'm assuming you've reached burnout on your side as well. What did that feel like for you? Were there specific signs that you noticed looking back, early warning signs, or was it something that kind of crept up on you without you noticing it? Um, Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so yes, looking back on it now, I 100% know that I reached a burnout. And what was really interesting to me is I didn't even know that it was burnout. Looking back on it now, I can definitely identify the early signs of burnout, which I do want to run through as well, because I think it's so important to catch it then and not when you've reached burnout. But I had a job where I was traveling every single day. I was on the highway every day. It was 2 hours, back and forwards, high pressure environment, fast pace. And I eventually reached a burnout. And all the signs of early burnout I was experiencing. I was feeling demotivated. I immediately thought that it was a sense of failure. I needed to do more. Instead of resting and recuperating and identifying what was going on with me, I pushed more. I wanted to, I had this idea that if I just got over the tip of the mountain, then everything would be okay. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way with your body, especially, and that is what burnout is. It's not just feeling tired or demotivated, it's an emotional drain and a physical drain. So, yeah, I reached burnout. I had no idea what was going on. It was so physical and emotional that it's very difficult to get out of. And bringing myself back out of burnout without even knowing that it was burnout was exceptionally difficult. I had my phone and I was actually Googling my symptoms and thinking, what is wrong with me? Do I need to go back to my laptop, sit on my laptop, work some more? And that's what I was doing. And it was just a recipe for disaster. I was spending so many hours in front of my computer, doing more and doing more, and I eventually just crashed. And that's when I picked up my phone and I Googled and I was like, what is going on? And the word burnout popped up. And yeah, it was scary. It was
Crazy.
really scary.
There's this story that is frequently told, in support groups for veterans, and it's the story about a soldier in the hole in a hole in the ground, and he can't get out, and he's freaking out, and all of a sudden his superior officer comes along and he says, use the tools that we gave you, right? And he throws in a shovel, and the soldier starts digging the hole, and he starts digging deeper, right? Because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work through it, right? You have to
Yes.
get across the mountain. You have to get through the problem. And he keeps digging, and all of a sudden someone else comes along, a doctor comes along, and he throws in some pills, and he says, deal with it. Drink these pills. It'll help you. It'll numb the pain, right? Instead of dealing with the problem. And so the soldier takes the pills, and he's still stuck in this hole. And then all of a sudden, another soldier comes past, and he jumps in the hole with him. And he's like, what are you doing? Now we're both stuck down here. And the soldier that jumped in said, calm down, buddy. I've been here before, right? And I think the moral of that story for me is, when you are in this place of burnout, sometimes the best way to help someone else, or the best way to help yourself, is to help someone else through it. What do you think of that?
Definitely, definitely. And we're human at the end of the day. So support is so important. So I definitely agree with that. And I think it's such a nice story to bring that to life, because I often think people that reach burnout, because it's such a mental and emotional tired, that people don't want to reach out. They kind of feel like a bit of a failure because they've reached this rock bottom and there's no way out. So yeah, I agree with that.
It's this thing of, a lot of the times when we reach burnout, we kind of feel that it's our fault. Like in the beginning, I said, it's self-inflicted, right?
Yes.
But is it really, is it really self-inflicted? Because you feel like it's your fault, but at the end of the day, we do have systems outside of our control. And a lot of the times people are just like, deal with it. Here's some pills. Drink,
Mm,
make you feel better, right? Get through it. And, I don't always think that that is the best way to overcome burnout.
definitely.
That brings me kind of into our next kind of question that I wanted to ask you. I want to
Mm,
talk to you about a doctor. He's called Dr. John Gray, and
mm.
he's known for, I don't know if you've read his book, but he's known for his book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I'm sure you've heard that before, right?
that before.
In the book, Dr. Gray discusses this innate emotional processing differences between men and women. And he explains that women often seek connection and empathy and emotional support as a way to process stress and to feel validated. And he says that, they want to talk things through and they want to feel understood before they move on to the problem solving step. Whereas men, in contrast, are more solution orientated and they're wanting to immediately kind of fix the problem because men see resolution as a way to relieve stress. Now, he attributes these tendencies to hormonal differences mostly, like oxytocin, which plays a big role in stress reduction for women. And what I want to ask you is, do you agree with this assessment? And if you do you think that women deal with burnout in a different way to men? And if so, what are those ways?
Look, it's a really touchy subject when it comes to men and women. Look, I think that there is a very physical aspect to it, and how men deal specifically with stress and how women deal specifically with stress. But when I've seen it in both cases where women have reached complete burnout and where men have reached complete burnout. So I agree and I disagree, because I think it's all dependent on your environment. How is your setup at home? How do you process things? A little bit more through the chemicals and how we are processing things differently. There's different responsibilities for men and women in the world. In some households it's shared, in some households it's different, but that also has a very big, contributing factor, because most of the time the women are looking after the children and cooking, and you still got to run the house and do all of these things. Plus you've got the additional stress of workload and trying to produce and so on. But then if you look at men as well, they also have a high workload on top of them. So I think I disagree, because I've seen both reach burnout the same way. Stress is stress, workload is workload. And I don't think that if you are a woman or if you are a man that you're going to get there faster or slower. I think we're pretty much the same. It's just the fast-paced world that we live in, and processing it and staying up to date.
I think, let me ask you this. So do you think talking about it is the first step to fixing it?
Yes.
Is that the first step, do you think? Okay. So the reason I ask, so for me, personally, and also I want to be careful with how I say this. It's sometimes not enough for me to just talk about mental health, right?
Mm.
I had this problem for ages. There was this campaign called It's Okay to Talk, right? And
Mhm.
this campaign was specifically trying to encourage men to open up about mental health. And I always kind of felt a little bit icky about it. I always just, it didn't really resonate with me. But keeping in mind that I'm very passionate about mental health, right? I have no problem
Yes.
talking about mental health, and I've suffered bouts of depression throughout all my 20s, and even now I
Mhm.
still have, my off days where I reach burnout and depression, and so I really was the person that needed to be spoken to by this, and yet, it takes, like a Canadian psychologist or a Stanford professor or like a bold MMA commentator or a neuroscientist that's into meditation to start talking to me in a way that made me genuinely consider my mental health. And whatever that reflected on the reason I didn't like the campaign, It's Okay to Talk, is, well,
Mm.
excuse my language, but no surprise. Like, obviously, it's okay to talk. Like, what's the
Yes.
next step? Like, give me something that I can actually use here. And on the other side of this, I learned this from Adam Lane Smith, who's a great psychotherapist. He said that male depression gets treated like female depression, and men are made to feel loved and accepted when what they actually want is to feel capable and powerful. In other words, men are sometimes provided with emotional validation when what they truly need is to feel competent and in control of their lives. And So the problem that I had with that and that we had there was that they were treating male depression and male mental health like they do female depression. Now, obviously, like
Mm.
you get women with more masculine traits and vice versa, and you get the shared responsibilities. But you get what I'm saying?
No, definitely. But I also don't want to put a label on it where it's just men and it's just women, because I think that it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man, everyone has their own processing, speed and how they need to, and it also stems right back into emotional well-being and from childhood and so on. So I'm very like in between with that. I don't know enough of it to give a proper opinion, but what I know so far, I do think that it's also very based on the individual themselves and what they would need, to come out of a depression or to feel validated or anything like that. I think it is very personal and individual, whether you're a man or a woman.
I agree with you. I think it's that typical thing, nurture versus nature as well. How you were
Mm,
brought up, versus just you are a man and this is how you deal with it, or you are a woman and this is how you deal with it. And I had a brilliant upbringing. I had a wonderful
mm,
mom and I have a fantastic dad. And when I think to the way that my mom raised me, in a very caring, loving, thoughtful way, and then I think
mm,
about the lessons that my dad taught me, there's two things that really stand out. And this is going to sound really basic, but I think a lot of men can kind of see to this as well. And it's different to how, for example, my sister would have been raised. And I once rode my bike over my neighbor's lawn, and my dad grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and he said, you respect other people's property. You never do that again. You go and apologize. And it was very much this tough love. And, that
mm,
for me was the male role model was, be tough, be strong, be respectful. And then
mm,
there's another one. And I remember when I'd done something wrong and I was really upset. I messed up, I completely effed up, and I was so
mm,
upset. And my mom wasn't there for whatever reason, and I was kind of expecting my dad to sort of come and go, Jacques, everything's gonna be all right, and instead he just sat there and he went, "What are you gonna do about it?" And that feeling of Jacques, you have to be strong. You have to take control of the situation and you have to take control. And he always told me, he said, you have to be mentally strong. And it was something that was drilled into me from a very young age. But
mm.
that thing of, I don't want to be coddled.
Yes.
I just want the
A
truth.
solution. Mm,
And I want to know what I've got to do. And I want to work it out on my own. Like I'll work it out in my head how to get there, but I want to know what to do. But
mm,
I think that speaks back to the thing that I just said, that it feels like things have to be much more tangible for me as a man. And I'm not sure if that's
mm,
me as a man or if it's me because of the way I was raised. Maybe I'm different to others. But I
mm.
don't want someone to just sit there and kind of stroke my ego and tell me that everything's going to be okay, and then I'm okay the way that
Yes.
I am. Because I think that over a prolonged period of time it can definitely lead to kind of an entitlement. And I do think that
Mm,
we see a lot of that in today's society. And I think that it can lead to softness and weakness. And I don't think that's the right thing in the long term, certainly not for me. So I do feel that there are specific steps that we need to take.
mm.
So I want to ask you, Terry, what do you think the men in our team, although we're not that many, what can we do when we reach that point? What can we do when we have burnout and we want a solution as to how we can work through it? What is your advice for us?
Well, I mean, if you're specifically, speaking about men, I do say this out of assumption because I do, every case is unique. And you would have to dive a little bit deeper if it was specifically to a person. But my advice would be look at your day. I think a lot of men like they want to provide, they want to provide. They've got that pressure on, they've got a family, they need to provide for them, they need to pay for the house, they need to do everything. So if I work 14 hours a day and there's no more hours in the day, then at least I can go to bed at night and I've done everything I possibly can. And I think that it sets the wrong narrative, because just as much as a new mother needs to rest and needs to look after herself, otherwise you cannot look after your baby, is the same that it goes for men with work. If if you're not establishing boundaries and making yourself, I think this is also really important, is making yourself feel that you do not you're not entitled. How do I say this? So not entitled is the wrong word, but rest is not a gift. It's not a reward.
Yeah.
Gift, rest is something that is a necessity, that you are entitled to rest. And I think a lot of men don't feel that way. They feel that they need to grind till the very end, otherwise they are a failure. And exactly, I've seen that so many times with in women as well. I mean, I can't just specifically say it is for men, but to go back to, what you should do is you've got to be as confident in setting your boundaries and what you need to do and working your specific hours and prioritizing rest and exercise and eating well and all those things just as much as the standard that you're putting up there of being a provider, because those things are the fundamentals that make you successful. So again, I mean, it's a mental thing. It's putting these principles in place from the beginning and making sure that you do feel worthy of rest and exercise and eating well and structuring your day and saying no. Actually, a little bit of a personal story with my own husband is I've seen it time and time again, and he's not emotional. I mean, I think I've seen him cry twice in the last 11 years. And I've seen him reach a physical burnout where he couldn't rest. It was like, it's 11 o'clock at night. You need to go and rest. You've got to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You've got to go and do the whole day over. And he just physically could not get himself to rest because he wanted to get it done. And he did get it done at the end of the day, but he was completely emotionally and physically burnt out. And that is from a strong individual with a great background, loved, nurtured, tough love, everything, but pushed himself to a point where he was in tears. And I think with men, it's overlooked a lot easier than with women. If I have to cry and I have to phone you and I say, Jacques, the workload's so much and I don't know if I could do this anymore. It's concerning. I'm not saying you wouldn't be concerned, but it's more acceptable. Where if it was a guy and they are phoning you and they are in tears and they're completely burnt out, they haven't finished their tasks because it's been a burnout that's been brewing for a while. And one of the symptoms of that is procrastination. You don't finish your tasks and it just becomes worse and worse. So
Vicious cycle.
it's just a vicious cycle. So in that context, it is very different for men and women. And I think it's harder for men to, once they've reached that stage, to actually come out and be able to find the help that they need.
That seems very much socially constructed then.
Mm.
But I think you touched on it briefly now.
Mm.
It actually feels kind of so much more difficult when you're working remotely and you're working from home to kind of notice these things, because it's so easy to wake up one morning and just not get dressed and just stay in your pajamas, or not go shower, not brush your teeth, or whatever it is that you avoid doing, and you just start working straight away. What is your thoughts on this? Do you think it's more difficult for those of us that's working remotely from home than, if, for example, you're working from an office?
Definitely. Look, I'm not diminishing the fact that you can get burnouts going into the office, because it happened to me. But with remote working, I know it is so important to have those boundaries in place. You've got to get up, you've got to make your bed, you've got to brush your teeth. Please brush your teeth. You've got to make your cup of coffee. You've got to be ready for the day as if you were going to be going to work. one of the things that we also discussed and touched on briefly before we did this podcast was, um, when you're working remotely, it's in the results. So if you're going into the office, you can go into the office and have a bad day and you like kind of just mosey around and you've had an off day, and then you go home and you feel quite accomplished because you went to work. People saw you there, you got dressed, you brushed your teeth, you got in your car and you went there. Where with remote working, it's so different. The only thing that people see are the results. And I think it becomes a little bit of an obsession. And this is also where burnout happens, because if you're not finished a task, I don't have to jump in my car and drive home, shut my laptop. I can just push in a little bit of an extra hour, get that task done, get this done. And then before you know it, it's a whole week where you've been working 14 hours. And the Monday comes, Friday, you're all confident, you've done your tasks, everything's great, it's amazing. Monday comes and you all of a sudden extremely insecure, you've lost your confidence. That is an early sign of burnout. You've pushed it too far, you're not prioritizing your hours. You've got to have that structure, especially with remote working.
Yeah, I agree. I found that the early warning signs for me for burnout is typically apathy, melancholy, alienation. I would have this lack of interest in pretty much everything, right? I would feel isolated and kind of estranged from my loved ones, and I would start feeling a kind of a very deep, lingering sadness, or even like a reflective sorrow on things that I haven't thought about in years. And
Exactly.
there's kind of this accepting life with this resignation, this sense of defeat, right? And I'm
Mm.
generally a very optimistic and happy person. So when these feelings start popping up, I know that I'm reaching that point of burnout. And I'm one of those people that when I feel that way, I typically wake up and I don't get dressed for work. I'll still brush my
Mm.
teeth, but I wouldn't get dressed. I'll stay in my pajamas. I wouldn't go out for like a week. I'll stay in my house for like a week, 2, 3 weeks straight, and that actually just makes things worse and worse.
Way
It's
worse.
kind of this. It escalates, and yeah, it's this vicious cycle.
And I think, Jacques, it's so important to be disciplined. A lot of people think that discipline means I need to be disciplined within my work. So did you still work when you were in your pajamas? Yes, you did. You still did your every task that you needed to do, but you didn't prioritize yourself. And I think the discipline in doing that, I mean, a little bit of a personal journey as well. I was going strong and I was one of those people that just want to finish all my tasks. And, the kids were still at school and they went for supper. So it was still quiet. So I worked 14 hours. And then the next day I worked 12 hours. And then, you just keep on pushing it because you go on this like high of completing tasks off. And I stopped going for walks. I hadn't left the house in a week. And you completely just push yourself into a burnout. So I think discipline really, really important. You've got to put yourself on that list.
Yeah.
It's not just about everything you need to do. You've got to put yourself at the top of that list, because if you don't, I mean, like one of the quotes that I really enjoy that everyone knows is that you can't pour from an empty cup. So
Yes.
you've got to fill that cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Terry, I think we're almost kind of reaching the end of our time limit here, but I wanna say, I want to touch on one more thing. Um, I don't know if you know who Jordan Peterson is. Have you heard of him before?
Rings a bell.
Sure.
Rings a bell.
One of my role models is Jordan Peterson, and the first time I went to go see him talk live, he got asked this question, and this person said, I was gonna pull that up. I don't want to get it wrong. The depth of my consciousness causes me to suffer. Is it a blessing or a curse to feel everything so very deeply? And I was like, I could give that man a podcast, right? Like whoever asked that question, like phenomenal question, right?
Yes.
And Peterson thought for a moment and he said, the only way out is through. you take more of the thing that poisons you until you turn it into a tonic that girdles the world around you. And I was like, that's awesome. He was like,
That
it's
is awesome.
a piece of advice. And what I took from that conversation that happened in that show that I attended, the the four things that Peterson said to help you get through burnouts. The first thing is acknowledge and accept the depth of your feelings, and that includes the feeling of burnout. The second thing was channel this awareness into understanding. And number three, use empathy as an outlet. Once you understand your burnout, you can help others overcome it, and you find a sense of purpose, turning this poison into a source of healing for others. And the fourth thing was to seek meaning, not just relief. And you have to find meaning in what you're experiencing, because depth of feeling often points to a desire for something deeper in life, whether it's purpose or connection or understanding. And by examining what truly matters to you, you turn suffering into a guide pointing you towards what is meaningful and what is life giving.
Mm.
And I think I would close off by saying, was it Anne Lamott said almost everything, and this is in reference to, I don't know if you ever saw what was it called, the IT Crew or something like that, and they always say, did you unplug it and plug it back in, right, when your computer's broken? And Anne Lamott said almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, and that includes you, right? Um,
100%.
Absolutely, yeah. Is there anything you want to end off with, or
Well,
anything?
I mean, I have to share this quote as well because it was something that also really just got me. And it said there, if you do not prioritize a break for yourself, your body will do it for you, and it's probably not going to be at a convenient time. And I just thought that that's so true. Like, how often do you push your limits, and then on the day of a really big day, you crash and you're not feeling so good. So what I took from that is, I mean, rather just prioritize it every single day than your body letting you know when it's going to do it for you. So
and,
yeah.
and stick to your boundaries.
Mm,
And stick to what you're supposed to be doing. Don't Yes, sometimes go the extra mile, but don't, go extra 10 miles every single day.
yeah. Realistic expectations.
Absolutely. But Terry, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with you. It was a fantastic conversation. And just to everyone listening, remember, you are your most important asset. So you have to take care of yourself. If you enjoyed this
Really.
video, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions, or if you have any comments on how you deal with burnout, please do leave them below. And we'll see you guys next time.